Evening, Peter. Good evening, Peter. Good evening, all.
Looks like they're on. Hi, Buzz. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
You come off so nice and clear. Hi, Peter. Hi, Graham. Cordell, nice to have you. Hi, Ben and Judy. And/or Judy.
Surprise, Phil.
So Phil, either you've changed backgrounds or you're calling from a different room than we're used
I'm
to.
at my neighbor's house because, as you know, I have a senior dog who wanders in and causes a commotion. Then I have to yell at my spouse, and it's all a big scene, and I feel like I'm not professional.
Okay. Okay. Always good to get the backstory.
Got a couple minutes. Not a big crowd. I thought John Joya would bring in a lot.
You, Phil. I thought so too. I was like, wait a minute, where is John Joya? It's like,
Well, he'll be here. I told him he could maybe miss the first 15 minutes of us, just the local stuff. He was very generous with his time on the phone, though, to determine some of the issues we might want to hear.
right. I was like, because I talked to his coordinator this morning.
Hello, Lisa. Oh, howdy, Jake. Let's give it a few minutes. It's not as busy. Here we have some people coming in.
Oh,
Hi, Sally. Somebody from Contra Costa. Hi, Sally. Hi, Lisa Johnson.
Hello.
Why, it's Lisa Johnson in front of a computer screen at a Zoom meeting. A rare sighting. I say we give it about 3 or 4 more minutes before we get started. Hi, Sergeant Patchen. Thanks for coming today.
No problem. Thanks for having me. This will be my last meeting.
What's going on?
I have been transferred from one end of the city to the other.
Oh, man.
I'm now going to be the beat 9 officer or sergeant. So I'll be
Is
on
it
the
a
complete opposite
promotion
end of
or
the city.
just, is it a promotion or just you moving?
No, what they did some realignment that's probably better. What they basically did was like Lieutenant Decius was my direct supervisor, but the other sergeants that were assigned to other southern districts, they were on completely opposite teams, so his interaction with them was minimal via email. So what they've done is, like my direct supervisor now is the northern district lieutenant. So reports are now northern district sergeant. Since he has direct interaction with them throughout the day, he's my direct supervisor. So now I'm a northern district sergeant. And so now Sergeant Melgoza is a swing shift officer. He responds to, he's supervised by Lieutenant Decius. So he's going to be the new one because they have direct contact basically every day.
Great. Well, we'll miss you. We need more baldness in this neck of the woods.
Well,
In
I
my
don't get it.
opinion.
What are you referring to? I don't get it.
In my opinion. All right, I see a lot of people popping in, so let's give it just a few more minutes because we do have such a VIP guest, and the county supervisor's office works long hours. So I would like to have as many residents as possible here when John joins us. And in addition to John, we're scheduled to have Lavanya Martin. And I see there's somebody else from the county named Christy. Hi, Christy.
Hi, sorry, my lighting is bad, so I'm staying off of camera.
Yeah, I do that on purpose.
Yeah, right. I'm the Director of Health, Housing, and Homeless Services, and I work with Lavana and closely with Supervisor Joya. He asked me to be here tonight as well.
Okay. Well, there's going to be a little presentation. Again, we'll give it just a few more minutes. We've been having a lot, but I think we may have a summer vacation issue right now. So I was expecting closer to 40 neighbors. So let's see who pops in.
Warriors game is on right now, playoff.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I'll
We should-
also mention this, the Wednesday night sailing. So there's that.
Yes, beer can race is going on right now.
Yep.
And there's a lot of there's a lot of boats out there tonight.
Sure are. I would guess about 40 myself, but
Yeah.
And Gary's not here because of the something like
The Warriors.
the Warriors. So
yep. DVRs are such a wonderful invention.
for people who can remain isolated and they don't hear.
Well, and don't care to watch commercials.
Well, I think we may need to maybe take a look at the games. When I was doing public events and lots of auctions and charity events, we always look for the sports ball games before we scheduled anything to see what else and who we were going to lose. Well, it's 35 after, so I think we should just go ahead and get started. And then see who comes on in, and we can always invite our esteemed guests back at a time when there's nothing more interesting than government going on. So it's now 7:35. We've got our secretary here. I know that Margie Sullivan, our treasurer, is gone, so Buzz is, or maybe coming in a little later. And I think Charmaine is also out of town. So Buzz will be, between Buzz and Peter and I and Lisa, will be all of the board members this evening. So it's 7:35. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And also, we'll start with calling the meeting to order. Do I have a second?
What
Do
was
I
that?
need a second?
Your voice garbled there for a second.
Sorry. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the minutes from last month. Do I have approval?
I second the motion.
Okay, so we're ready to get going. We're going to start right away with Sergeant Patchen. For those of you who've just come on, this is his last meeting with us because he's just moving as far away from us as he can get. It's all about you, Sergeant Patchen.
Make sure I unmute myself there. All right. I did provide the stats. So I pulled stats a little bit different for you guys this time. I think there's more interest in overall crimes versus just the crimes that result in the report being generated. I just received a text from Sergeant Melgoza. His Zoom, of course, is going through a mandatory update, so he's going to try and join us hopefully very shortly. But what I had them do was I had them do just actual calls for service instead of just reports that were drawn. So it gives you a better overall idea. I did speak with our crime people. I believe the concern kind of was, well, how is the overall health of the city, calls for service, crime, that type of stuff. And I think there's also a question regarding, how is Point Richmond comparing and crime analysis basically said the same thing I did. You can't really do a Point Richmond to the rest of the city because it's not apples to apples. It would be almost impossible to do. So this is what I did have them pull. I will say that Michelle Malam did just post a video on our social media. I pinned it on our Facebook if you want to go to our Facebook feed, and it does provide instructions on how to utilize our crime mapping and our stat software to obtain more detailed stats if that is something that interests you. But basically, we're looking at, there is a slight increase. If you look at the month to month, these stats are unfortunately 1 week off because I messed up and I thought the meeting was last week and I had the incorrect dates pulled. But up till last week, those were the stats. There is a decrease from year to year, but a slight increase month to month. And I would kind of attribute that probably to the weather. And, we're getting closer to summer. There was also spring break, so there's probably a little more going on. I'm guessing stats probably aren't the big topic that everyone wants to talk about. I know the homeless encampments and some other stuff, have been large issues. I know they're being addressed, and I'm guessing that's probably why you have some of these other speakers coming on tonight. But I'm here to address any concerns or answer any questions that you may have.
Anybody? So just a quick review. There have been approximately a dozen or just under a dozen new homeless folks who have joined our community in the last, maybe Lisa, about 10 days. From 2nd and 1st Street and lots in the Triangle under the freeways in both of our existing encampments. One gentleman died on Tuesday of last week. While the various city departments and county tried with a little lack of success in getting him services. I do understand, and I don't have the details. Perhaps you can tell me, Sergeant Patchen, there was also another homeless person found dead at the elementary school. Is that so?
I am not aware of that incident. I can try and research it and get back to Lisa with information, but I am unaware of that incident.
Okay.
Do you know about when that occurred, or?
It would have been last week. This is for the PTA told me this, but if anybody lives around the elementary or has children there and might know a little bit more, that could be useful. So we're having an influx, and I just want to fill you in. I'll do it a little during Sergeant Patchen's time because we have such a long meeting tonight. The city is on this like white on rice, and that's a good thing. They want to help these folks coming in, and they want to determine where they're coming from and offer them services pretty quickly. There's been a noticeable uptick in drug sales and use in the downtown area, and just an unfortunate amount of mental illness. So is it Sergeant Patchen?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. Is it Sergeant Dacius, Donald Dacius?
It's Lieutenant Dacius, and then I'm Sergeant
Lieutenant.
Patchen, and Sergeant Melgoza actually just joined us on the call.
Thanks.
You can see him on the grid, and he will be taking over for me as the Beat 1 sergeant. So he will be the one replacing me, possibly attending these meetings, but also if you have any concerns that the beat officers aren't addressing, you can address them to him.
Thanks. Welcome to our neighborhood, more than you've been, Sergeant Melgoza. So I just want to say that Lieutenant Dacius has sent me an email that there's going to be quite a more visible patrol, particularly in and around the very point where the drugs are coming and going out of from under the freeway. On 1st and 2nd. And what I'm going to suggest to the board this week is that we might consider having a future meeting that isn't actually a dedicated meeting to address homelessness as it affects us in Point Richmond, because I think that 30 minutes or 40 minutes is a little bit of a stretch. So if anybody has any thoughts about having a dedicated meeting, if you'll throw it into the chat, then we can take a look, and that will give us more time. That meeting would include the county, city officials, RPD, and possibly even the fire department, because that's been an issue as well. So I don't like to take up the officers' time, but I do want to let you know what's kind of going on for those of you who are not aware, if you don't live in the immediate neighborhood or you don't have eyes on the neighborhood. Does anybody have any questions for the sergeants? Lisa?
Are you able to comment on, we have had a lot in the last few weeks of suspicious persons, unwanted persons. I know that was captured in your report, that uptick.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious, and a lot of that's happening in various areas, some around the Chevron station. Are you able to comment if those are mostly homeless individuals, or how many of them are actually there when RPD arrives?
I'd like to take a look at the stats real quick. To be honest, I mean, it doesn't take, from what you guys are saying, I mean, you guys live there, right? I'm there for 10 hours out of the day, 4 days a week. And if you guys are living there, if you guys are saying there's an increase in homeless individuals that are now part of that encampment, then that's what I would say is probably fueling those. As far as those suspicious persons and actually them being located, I'd say it's kind of few and far between. The reason being is, I'll be honest, the suspicious person's calls, depending on what else is going on in the city, we might be tied up and not be able to get to it for a while. And so unless they're doing an overt act that's dangerous or threatening somebody or something like that, if it's just, hey, I see this suspicious person, depending on the time of day, by the time we get there, they might be gone. But I think it'd be easy to guess that this is attributed to the homeless encampment that is underneath the freeway. Which is, again, you kind of run into the issue of it deals with jurisdiction. So that area is actually Caltrans property. So Caltrans has to come in to do the appropriate tagging, the warning, Corps needs to go in, and then they can start working on moving them out. But I would say it's a safe bet that, yeah, that's going to be attributed to those things. And it could be also, these meetings, we talk in these meetings about being vigilant, if you see something, report it. And so really, you guys are the best reporters. I'm not calling in suspicious people. It's you guys saying, hey, this person doesn't belong in my neighborhood. They're doing something suspicious. And that's what's prompting us to come out. So word of mouth, hey, report this so that the police are aware, could also be fueling the increase in the calls.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Patchen. And any other questions before we let these hardworking officers head back? And looks like Sergeant Malgoza is still there.
I say we make Sergeant take himself off mute and introduce himself. I'll let him introduce
It
himself.
looks like we have a question from Norma Jean.
Thanks, Phil. Quick question. I mentioned in chat, there seems to be an individual camping near Mechanics Bank. I would believe that it's on BNSF property. So do I call the police or do I call BNSF? That's my question. Thank you.
Norma, may I field that question? Everybody is aware that he's here. He was moved off of BNSF property and is now camping out on the other side of the fence on city property. All the services are well aware that he's here. He happens to be particularly friendly, and they're hoping that he's someone who will be enthusiastic about receiving treatment or help. So that was a good catch, and everybody needs to know knows.
Terrific. Thank you.
Last call for questions. Going once, going twice. Sergeant Patchen, thanks for all your support over here. Welcome, Sergeant Mangoza, going 3 times, last and final call. Gentlemen, go home or go back to work. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All righty, so we'll move on to President's report. As we mentioned, I just touched on a little bit of the homelessness. I do want to tell you what is happening. And it's not happening in a time that facilitates a PRNC meeting being present. After the death of this one and possibly second person, all of the homeless resources are getting together with Michelle Milan from the Richmond Police Department. They're going to hold a community meeting and the business association is going to be there. And this is my suggestion. After they have a game plan that, as I just mentioned, the PRNC will investigate whether or not we should have a special meeting when there's something to say. That meeting, the meeting amongst all the various departments, I think is scheduled for sometime at the end of April. And then as soon as possible thereafter, we'll try to get the same players together to have perhaps either a PRNC meeting or a special meeting that will allow for more time and more explanation. It is one of the reasons that John Joya has been generous enough to come, because it's sort of a little bit of a perfect storm of homeless issues in our neighborhood. The second thing I really want to do, which is even perkier and much more cheerful, is I wanted to mention the spring fling that occurred on the 8th. It was, I think, a really successful event. We took the existing art stroll that was sponsored by the Arts at Point Richmond. Cram did children's activities. We moved our spring fling onto Park Place, closed the street, gave away 600 spring eggs and toys in what was the most exciting egg hunt I've ever seen. Did games with the children. We had a live DJ sponsored by the PRNC. We had some volunteers who came to help. Jake was there all day doing everything that needed to be done. Isabel and Greg did a lot of setup, and Anna and Sophia were there, and they actually ran the egg hunt in a very organized way. And I think that most of us will agree that the combined Spring Fling art show was a huge success. Was anyone there? A couple of you. It was fun, yeah?
Yes.
And I also think it's going to be a template for future events where more than one organization gets together. Karen's here. We were just talking about possibly doing something in the fall with the business association. So I want to thank those volunteers and remind all of you that even if it's for a couple hours, we can always use volunteers for these types of events. And I need to also mention that Women's West Side and other volunteers spent pretty much 2 days sprucing up the town triangle for the event with the assistance of the city of Richmond, who sent the Parks Department in to do an extra cleanup. So everybody cooperated, and I want to thank everyone. I think it was really super fun. Now I'm going to turn the rest of my time over to Peter so that, hi, Peter. I should have given you a heads up. So he can comment a little bit on where we are on the upcoming election of a new officer. And because he is the election committee.
Hi, everyone. So yes, we are going to be electing a new membership chair. Buzz Bayless, who is he's been our membership chair for a while. He's been a long-standing member and stalwart board member. He's retiring, and we're going to really miss him. But in the meantime, we do have to fill that seat. So this will be a vice president role, and I am taking candidates, suggestions if you are interested in that role. We do have a couple people that have spoken up about it. I was hoping to see them on this meeting, but I don't. So, but anyway, we are going to vote on this next month. So there'll be candidates. You can campaign if you like, that's up to you. And then when it comes time to vote, we will be voting by a show of hands at the next meeting. So I'm going to impose on Buzz here for a moment, if he's open to it, if he can explain what it is that he does, so you guys have an idea of the kind of shoes you'll be filling. So Buzz, could you elaborate?
I certainly can, Peter. Thank you. Thank you for all the kind words. I deal with the PRNC email account, replying to emails that come in. That is also where when the dues are paid electronically via PayPal, that's where they show up. Notification shows up. I take that notification and update a spreadsheet that we have that has all the members and their addresses and phone numbers and and of course their email address. And if it's a new member, I also get to go over to the Google group page that we have and add that member to the Google group. And the Google groups is just the mechanism how we email out something on the order of 400 newsletters each month, and none of them end up in anyone's spam folder. So that's what Google Groups does, and that's what I do.
Thanks. Then can we segue into the actual membership report?
You
and
bet.
also remind
Oh,
people
I-
that dues are due. Oh, Peter,
I
go ahead.
do have one more thing, is you do have to be a paid member to vote. So remember to get your membership up to date, and that's it. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
What we'd like is, if Buzz, if you will segue into your report and then directly into the treasurer's report, then we can let John, who's been doing a lot of budget stuff for hours on end, make a presentation with Christy and Lavana.
Be happy to do that. Just as a reminder to the membership that the dues year starts the 1st of May. And so technically, most all of you owe us a check, but humor aside, we don't control that. That's strictly if you send us a check or a PayPal in the past couple of months, that's probably going to carry you for another 12 months. So you're good to go. As far as membership now, we're approaching 170 dues paying members. And we've had a nice run for the past week or 10 days of 2 or 3 PayPal deposits per day. So it's been I like being busy when it's depositing money into our account. And on to, speaking of the account, now I'll switch my hat, figuratively, and go to Margie's treasurer's report. So the expenses that that the Treasury paid out this month were $4,150 for the Janus Play Lot, $580 for the Spring Fling, which included the DJ, some signage, and some gifts, and $227 towards a business license as we work towards a grant to refresh the paint on the village side of the tunnel. So all told, we have about a little over $19,000 in the bank. $3,187 came in the past month to PayPal, so a little over $22,000 in the checking account. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much, Buzz. And I do want to remind those of you, the money for the partial renovation of Janus Play Lot went out, but it had come in as a grant, and there's still money for future improvements. I would like to be as respectful as possible and get this show on the road for John Joya. First of all, John, thank you so much for your generous time. I didn't realize there was a ball game on, so you have a slightly smaller crowd, but we gossip a lot. I'm going to let you just take it from here.
Thanks, Philip. And I am will come anytime on any topic, and you want us to focus on homeless issues, so we will do that tonight. And in the future, if you want other issues, county related, let me know. It's good to be here, and I'm here with two of our officials from our health department. We have Lavana Martin, who is a deputy health director, and she does oversee what's called health, housing, and homelessness. And also Christy Saxon, who actually heads our health, housing, and homelessness. Lavana used to head it. She is now more senior and a deputy director in health. And what we're going to quickly do is go through, I'm going to talk a bit about big picture, county picture, and then we want to deal with your issues. And I'm going to talk a bit as we go through this slide presentation about the work that we are doing as well on a statewide level on some new legislation, working with the governor to change the homeless system of care. And I'll get into that because let me honestly say to you, having been in office for as long as I have, with more money being dedicated by the state toward homelessness, it has not made a difference. Homelessness has increased across this state. We've talked to the governor about it. We've talked to legislators about it. The system is broken. I have the honor of serving in leadership at the California State Association of Counties. I'm on their 15-member executive committee. You may have read an op-ed that was published in the East Bay Times and the San Jose Mercury News by myself, Alameda County Supervisor Keith Carson, and Santa Clara County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg. And we are all in leadership at the State Association of Counties. We have spent the last year working with our folks in county government across the state in mental health, housing, homeless services, to look at what works, what doesn't work, and have come up with a statewide proposal that we are hoping to working to get it in legislation over the next 2 weeks, part of it in legislation, that would revamp the how homelessness is dealt with in California. Let me say this. Whatever we do in good projects in Contra Costa or in Richmond is not ultimately going to make as significant an impact if we don't change the way the state, the city, and the counties address homelessness. We had a historic summit in Sacramento a couple of weeks ago with city and county leaders from across the state. There were 2 Richmond council members there. I want to acknowledge Doria Robinson and Sohail Abana. I know I have spoken to your council member, Cesar Zepeda, who I know is very interested in partnerships. And we had big city mayors, small city mayors, supervisors, and I will talk a little more about that, but just wanted to say, I am spending a lot of my time on that, as well as the local issues, because we need to fix that in terms of clear roles for the city, the county, and the state. Believe it or not, there's no clear responsibility outlined in state law of who's responsible to what. There's no accountability for agencies and outcomes and how money is spent. And so our proposal, and I can put in the chat the link to the principles of this proposal. And I actually had today, Keith Carson and I from Alameda met with the San Francisco Chronicle editorial board. I've met with the editorial board of the Times and Mercury News. There's folks from Southern California meeting with the LA Times. We're forming a coalition and really working on this change. And El Cerrito Mayor Lisa Motoyama and I, who came to the summit, are making a presentation to the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference in August. So I just wanted to give that big picture. And I will have, if we can have the permission to put up a slide deck to talk about what's happening here in Contra Costa. So it's, I see things as 3 parallel tracks. What are we doing to solve it from a neighborhood level? What is our system in Contra Costa? And how do we reform the state? So Lavana, do you want to put up your slides? And so Philip, if we could have
yeah, where's Buzz?
Pardon?
Where's Buzz?
Buzz?
Buzz is the meeting host, and I don't see him here.
I believe I have the ability to share my screen. So
let's give it a try. Welcome to the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council. we're very low tech.
Let me see if this works. Let me know.
Yes,
Yes.
it works. And
And-
Luana, you're gonna go through it quickly, so we have time for questions too. Right.
It was clearly illustrated by Dr. Seuss, so it's a win-win.
Absolutely. So I'm also going to go ahead and take myself off camera because sometimes it slows down as I'm talking. So I'm going to take myself off camera. Please let me know though if you can't hear, or Christy will be in the background texting me in the event something goes wrong. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you very much for inviting me today. We are going to go through this very, very quickly, and I hope to leave most of the room to the end so that you can ask as many questions as you like. The agenda for this evening really is just understanding who we are as Contra Costa Health, and specifically housing and homeless services, what we do, services and housing that we have available, what our strategy is on homelessness, and as Supervisor Joya pointed out, some of the challenges that we have. We're going to get real and have these conversations around some of the opportunities but challenges that we face, and then we're going to leave off on what I hope is a good note around funding, because there are opportunities ahead of us. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Let me see if I can put us in presentation mode. Okay. It's not liking presentation mode. There we go. All right. So who are we? So just really quickly, the health department has about 9 programs and services. We are unique in Contra Costa as housing and homelessness is actually part of the integrated system of health in our community. And that's unique because some of those other services that we know are so critical to helping individuals in their homelessness are actually already under our umbrella. So those services like behavioral health services, as individuals potentially become incarcerated, we have detention health services, as well as the traditional public health services, hospitals, as well as our public hospitals. So really important to note that we really do treat housing as health in our community, and we've been able to reap the benefits of being in an integrated system of care. Specifically, health, housing, and homeless services provides outreach, shelter, interim housing. I'll talk a little bit about what those are. Transitional housing, permanent and permanent supportive housing. And we're also the administrative entity for the system, the continuum of care. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. But ultimately, in a nutshell, we are a direct service delivery provider in this community, as well as doing a lot of the systems, policy, and planning work to really provide guidance and strategies on how to address homelessness in our community. Some of the things that you are already aware of, we have outreach services, core teams out there in our community. We have 14 core teams throughout Contra Costa. There are 2 specifically connected to Richmond, and we are excited because eventually we will be growing to add 4 more core teams that will also provide additional weekend and evening coverage. Again, we can talk a little bit more about that if you have interest. I'm going to keep moving through, but we're excited about our outreach, as we are one of the few communities that actually has a really robust outreach program in our system of care. But those aren't the only mobile teams that we have in our community. We also recently expanded and launched our A3, which is ensuring that individuals who are having behavioral health crises can get support, right? Anyone, anywhere, at any time. It is really important that CORE, as one of the oftentimes first individuals to connect to persons who are living on the street, also have additional resources available to them too, and can support individuals who might be in crises. Currently, We will be ramping up very soon to 15 adult teams in operation. Those are hitting the streets now. We have also teams that are specifically dedicated to youth. We have a call center so that anyone in our system can call for assistance and actually get to someone who can specifically, who is licensed, who can understand what their needs are, and then determine whether or not what types of response they need. And that means getting in a vehicle, getting to individuals where they are, wherever they may be. Sometimes that might require a response in tandem with the police departments. And we are really excited to continue to grow this program to get to a 24/7 opportunity and operating. I wanted to operating timeframe. I want to make sure that the number there, just please make note of that. And I will also make sure that these slides are available to you afterwards, but it's really important to remember that number.
Let me add on this.
Absolutely.
So this is being funded out of our Measure X. It costs $20 million a year. It's countywide. And the reason it's taking time to make it 24/7, as you all know, there's a shortage of mental health and behavioral health workers and therapists. I'm in Kaiser, for example, and Kaiser has had a pretty strong backlog of mental health appointments for the same reason, for shortages. So we are hiring and training, and if you know individuals who are interested with the background, Contra Costa County Mental Health is hiring. I will say the city of Richmond has proposed something in addition to this that they're calling their crisis response. It is more designed for low-level emergencies like domestic disputes, arguments, those kinds of things. It does not replace this, and this does not. This is going to be countywide. Law enforcement could respond or not, depending on the needs, but this is designed, and you can get to it through calling 911 as well. It is not 24/7 now. There is a ramp up as we hire more behavioral health workers. And what Richmond's doing is I would call it additive to this and separate, but doesn't replace this.
Great. Thank you for providing that additional information. So as we talk about what we have available in our system of care and moving on to services and housing, want to just talk about what we currently have available in our homeless continuum of care. So the housing inventory as of the 2022, that we had about 2,600 beds, a little more than 2,600 beds across our system of care. That includes 780 emergency shelter beds. Sometimes you'll hear the word interim housing, but very similar concepts, 780 beds. Transitional housing, which tend to be a little bit longer stays with services, those are 245 beds. And then we have an additional 1,655 beds for permanent housing. And that's not only just permanent supportive housing, it's also other types of permanent housing opportunities, including rental assistance, long-term rental assistance, as well as vouchers that might be available. So that is inclusive of all of those types of housing. Just to note, the city of Richmond specifically hosts the greatest number of emergency shelter and transitional housing beds in the county, with approximately 31% of the beds are actually hosted in the city of Richmond. So we are really proud that many of the individuals receiving who need that emergency services are getting them right there and right here in our Richmond community.
Let me add to the last one, and
Absolutely.
I'm going to say this, and others have different points. There may be others who advocate different things. We strongly believe that the solution is building and operating more permanent housing for previously homeless individuals with support. Some people said just build housing. Housing doesn't work unless you pay for this permanent supportive services on site. We are building, for example, 50 units in San Pablo, a project that San Pablo approved near Contra Costa College. We're converting a previously vacant office building into about 50 units of small 300 square foot units, a couple larger ones with kitchenettes and bathroom with supportive services on site. And to show how funding is always a challenge, we are using 3 sources of funding for that. We are setting aside, we just approved our recommended budget yesterday at the Board of Supervisors. We are setting aside $12 million a year in Measure X money into what we call a housing trust fund, with much of that money being spent to build this type of housing. The project in San Pablo involves a grant from HUD that is ongoing every year that helps pay for services. It involves some money from the state, and it's our local dollars. We recently had approved in Richmond a housing project on the site of the former Richmond Health Center near Target, across from the courts. Embedded in that project with our community-based nonprofit developers who built it are units. I forgot how many, whether it's 10 or 5 or 10, but there are units there for previously homeless individuals. You don't have to put all of those units in one building together like we're doing in San Pablo. You can also put them in a larger development as well. The supportive services are part of that. And that has been our focus. Let me just tell you, while RVs may be temporary solutions for people, our focus is getting people a permanent roof over their head. Not to be in a tent, not to be in an RV, but to be in one of these. And cities get funding as well. One of the things we're looking statewide is, how does more money come to us? The cities have asked for $3 billion a year with no strings attached from the state. We have said any money we get from the state should come with accountability for what folks are doing. No strings attached doesn't work. The system doesn't work. We need measures to ensure outcome and accountability. So I just wanted to note that is a strategy we are pursuing with multiple funding.
Fantastic. Supervisor Joya, you are taking all the fun out of my wonderful. I don't get to say it. You are so well versed in all of it.
At the end, I'm going to say, well, this exists. We're going to hear from you the local problems and challenges and how cities, counties need to work together, because it is not one responsibility of the county. It's not one of the city. For example, we don't have control in city limits to decide when to clear an encampment. That is the city. The whole issue on Ryden Road, the city did eventually set a date that they had to be out of there. That's something the city does. We can do that in unincorporated areas. We recently went a few months ago and worked before an encampment really got started. I think it was on Pittsburgh. Was it on Brookside Drive in unincorporated
Yes.
North Richmond? There were some encampments and RVs starting to form. So before there were too many, I know CORE went out there to work hard to relocate individuals to get them into some type of housing, transitional or permanent, before it became larger. We did buy, for example, with state dollars, a Motel 6 in Pittsburgh and converted that to permanent housing. We are looking at renting. It's not in Richmond, in another city, part of a hotel for people ready for housing. So I think that is a solution that we are looking at as well.
Thank you. So I think what I will do is I want to leave as much time as possible for Q&A. So I will skip really most of this slide. There are ways that individuals can connect to our system of care, and there are a number of interventions that we utilize to support individuals ending their homelessness. And as Supervisor Joya had said, that really we're not looking at short-term solutions. We know that the answer are long-term permanent solutions. And so it's really important as we think about strategy in our system of care that we absolutely have to think about how do we slow inflow into our system of care by looking at prevention services, but ultimately, what are the permanent solutions? How do we continue to grow those permanent solutions to homelessness, whether that is permanent supported housing, which are those, again, that housing with supports, or maybe it's rental assistance for individuals who need it for a short amount of time, or who might need it for the rest of their lives. We are ensuring that we are developing the resources to address all of this. Our strategy has to be comprehensive, and it has to be collaborative. And so what's really interesting in our system of care, we have many entities who are really clear about strategies to address homelessness. Luckily, most of them are congruent. And so
Well, let's move
yes,
on.
you want to talk
Yeah,
a little
and
bit
let me
about
just
at
say,
home?
right, and at home, I will just say this. What at home stands for, which is sort of the main principles, is basically one, accountability, which is to define clear responsibilities aligned with money and resources and flexibility for cities, counties, and the state. The T stands for transparency, which is to basically integrate and expand our data to improve program effectiveness. So we take the data from our folks who are in our criminal justice system, our health system, our social service system, and take measurements and outcomes so that money goes to programs that work. And if a program is proven not to work, there's no funding. We shift that funding. H stands for housing, obviously increasing and maintaining more housing units across the spectrum. O is outreach, which is to develop more sustainable outreach systems and a workforce to do that. M is mitigation, which is strengthening our safety net programs, people on the verge of homelessness. For example, some of the social service programs that got increased during the pandemic actually reduced poverty. It didn't but it didn't necessarily decrease homelessness. It went up, right? E is economic opportunity, which is creating employment and education pathways for folks. And again, these are things cities and counties can both do with sustainable funding from the state. So moving on.
Absolutely, thank you. So we know, as
Next slide. Next slide, I guess.
Yep, accountability is really important. But here are the challenges that we face. Let's start with the challenges first. We know that there has been a growth in homelessness, and quite honestly, it's outpacing housing production availability. That's not unique to Richmond, not unique to Contra Costa. It is statewide. There is a disconnection between funding and planning. Oftentimes, we get dollars to plan to work on these things, and our plans may be completely incongruent with the funding that is categorical and unavailable. So if we know that we want permanent solutions, but all the funding is for emergency shelters, that is something that we have to manage. And so we continue to work on that. Some of the other challenges, there are just a complexity of network funding policies, agencies that we have to contend with every day. And let's not forget housing affordability. But there are some opportunities that we have, not only sort of thinking about how we convene our local partners, that is at the city level, federal level, county. We want to make sure that we have the opportunity to work together, as many of our cities are actually working on their own strategic plans. We want to make sure there's alignment there. And the city of Richmond has most certainly started looking at their strategic plan, and we want to work to continue to make sure it's all aligned. There is now a multi-sector call to action, which we are very excited about. It's not only just looking at housing and homeless service delivery system, but how does the health system play a role and what's its role? How does our employment and workforce development play its role? We are looking at that and defining, as Supervisor Joy was saying, in the at-home plan, what are the roles? What are the city's roles? What are the county's roles? And ensuring that we are addressing homelessness. Opportunities to increase revenue. And we need to make sure that as those dollars come in, that again, that they are strategically placed where they need to be so that we can make sure that our numbers continue to go down. And that requires, again, a lot of collaboration and partnership. And the last are expanded services. So things like A3 that we're talking about is complementary to what we are doing and absolutely necessary. Thinking about expansion of core teams, so on and so forth. Those are really exciting opportunities. On the horizon, we have about $35 million going to hit the streets this year. That includes an allocation from HUD that's about $17 million. That's going to our nonprofit community-based organizations and partners who are delivering services. We also are receiving additional $5 million to specifically address unsheltered homelessness in our community. And that was a bonus that we didn't expect, but really excited that Contra Costa was received those dollars from our federal partners at HUD. As well as that Supervisor Joya had mentioned, we have additional dollars coming in through the Measure X Local Housing Trust, including additional dollars from the state, like
So
the
why don't we
homeless and
move
housing
on?
assistance.
So we'll move on to one thing I do want to say. This doesn't include cities get some allotments. Richmond, as you know, got around 4.8 million to address the Castro encampment.
Absolutely.
That's their issue. That didn't come to us. It's under their control. So I know they've been using that. So I know you're getting folks from the city and you can ask them about those kinds of things. You want to move? Should we move on?
Well, that was it. You've
Okay.
already mentioned the El Portal 54
Got it.
micro units. So we're excited about that. If you have any additional questions, you can always reach myself or Christy. Please open the floor for questions.
Right. Well, the last point I will make is the homeless population is as diverse as our population in general, right? There are majority of people who are unhoused have either or a combination of mental health and substance abuse issues. There are those who don't and who had issues where they fell out of housing from affordability, lost a job, but the hardest to work with by far are people with mental health or substance abuse issues. California, you cannot force somebody into involuntary mental health treatment under the laws of the state of California unless you have one of two things: a conservatorship set up, which is very difficult and expensive, or Laura's Law. We are a county that's adopted Laura's Law, which allows others like law enforcement, medical folks, family, to help get folks into some forms of involuntary treatment. Also very hard and expensive, not as much as conservatorship. The governor has proposed a system of care courts. Contra Costa will enter that system in a year, I think. And it's designed to try to get more people into voluntary mental health treatment. If someone says, why can't that person go to treatment? Because under state law, you cannot force them to. If you've spoken to someone who has schizophrenia and is in psychosis, they won't realize that they need treatment. That has been one of the biggest challenges that we face, is getting people to enter treatment, because many times the only way they're going to be supported in housing with services is that they've already entered treatment. We are also moving away from congregate care shelters because people want more privacy and take their pets. We remodeled the county's shelter in North Richmond to allow more of that. That's why we're focusing more on individual units and rooms there, so I'll end with that. And I'm sure we'll answer more in questions.
I thank you very much for that presentation. I think that one of the big takeaways is that a lot of what's happening is happening in the city. And that although all of the departments want to cooperate, it sounds like sometimes the city's doing its thing and the county might not be doing the same thing. Let's start with the questions. I know you're not Vivian, please. There's Vivian. Hi, Vivian.
That's Dr. Ritterman, I could tell. Dr.
Yeah.
Ritterman, good to see you,
I
Jeff.
don't know who's speaking.
That's Jeff Ritterman.
Jeff, are you going to speak?
You're
Please
muted,
unmute
Jeff.
yourself.
You're muted. Vivian's gonna have to help you.
I need Viv to help me. Well, first, wow, what a tour de force. The presentation was, I was totally impressed, and big dollars you're talking about. So I'm just wondering, since this problem is all over, if we were to be successful, do you have any concern that it will draw in homeless people from all around the Bay Area and sort of overwhelm the effort?
I don't, Lavana can offer that. I don't think so. First of all, the plan, there are parallel plans. What are we doing in Contra Costa and in Richmond? And then what are we doing statewide? I think the goal of our efforts on statewide reform is to make every community as successful as possible. I mean, obviously we want our community to be successful, but let me just repeat this. The lack of success statewide in all communities is the failure of a system that doesn't have accountability, that spends more money and more people become homeless. And unless we fix the system, we're not going to make significant progress locally. I mean, the governor has put more money toward homelessness than this state has ever spent. So Jeff, I think frankly, the goal is to get people off the streets into housing. And I don't think being successful means homeless are going to come here to wait in line. People generally tend to stay in their communities. They don't, and community may mean the I-80 corridor, Berkeley, Oakland, Richmond, or out in Pittsburgh, Antioch, Brentwood, that's a community. So I don't know if Lavana and Christy have other comments on that.
I think our data shows that 80% of the individuals in our system of care are actually from the community. They do not tend to move very much because this is where their resources are. This is where their home is. This might be a friend who continues to help or a parent. So we don't see as much movement as many people think. 80% time and time again are actually from the community.
And is there a plan for job training in this?
Richmond, the county, everyone has a role with workforce development. And that's a parallel system where we have a need for that. And as you can see in one of the pillars of the foundation of the at-home plan is to work on workforce development, which means the state also determining how that money goes, cities, counties. Yes, workforce development is an important piece of it.
Thanks, Jeff. Peter. You're muted.
Yep. No, I've got the impression that quite a few of the homeless are working people. Yeah. So is this, I know homelessness is a nationwide problem, but it does seem to be particularly, California is certainly got the majority of them.
We have by far the largest, I think a third of the homeless is in California. Is that the number I saw? Christy or Lavana? A third of the homeless is in California. Yes.
Now, is that because the cost of living is just so high and we have so few houses here? So is the real answer to this just developing more affordable housing?
I'll say something and the Lavana and others can add.
Okay.
I like anything, it's not one cause. I think clearly lack of affordable units is one example. But remember, there are people who fall into homelessness because of affordability. And it's a combination, again, if those who have mental health and substance abuse, that is a more major determinant. That is one. I think, and I can't speak for what's happening in other states. I'll just say this, the system in California is screwed up. The system in California on homelessness causes finger pointing, no clear turf issues. And so that is why ultimately we stepped back and said we need to reform the system in California in a major way. So I think the system itself, how do you account for a system that puts more money into it, but less results? So the system that we have in California with no clear accountability and roles, I think is a large part of it. Housing is a part of it. in California, it is also, the laws make it difficult to force people into, when I say force, to have involuntary mental health treatment. That's a portion of it. So there's a combination of factors, like many things, it's not one factor.
Thanks, John. Lisa?
Can you guys comment on the status of the core teams? So I know we have a Richmond specific team. We have a West County team. And when I last talked to Marino, who was, heading up the West County team on the ground, I talked to him last month and he said that currently we had no Richmond people and he was the sole person in West County and all of Richmond. So if we only have one person servicing on the ground all of West County, I just see it's almost as it's kind of broken at the moment too, from a lack of ability to keep people staffed with core out on the ground. So that's my first question, and wondering how you guys are trying to tackle that, and what is the real driver of not keeping them staffed? Is it like, I think that's what people are not clear on. Like, are they going to desk jobs? Like, what is the issue with keeping those teams?
Right. Christy probably.
Yeah, happy to. Well, this will be perhaps a little bit of bad news for you, Lisa. We just promoted Marino, which is fantastic for him. We've kept him in our workforce, but he has been promoted. But what we've been doing to address this, it really comes down to, this is a high turnover frontline staff work. They're long hours. My folks were out in our storms from 7 o'clock in the morning till midnight. Every night the storms were handing out tarps, making sure people were safe. It's just an idea of what they do day in and day out. And because of that, there can be higher turnover. However, what we're doing right now, we have a Castro team, we have a Richmond team. We're working with the city of Richmond to bring on a second Richmond team, which will cover everywhere.
How many people are out there? Because Lisa's saying only one person. Is that correct or not?
No, we do have more than that. So Marino might be limited in what his view is, because we have several teams that can go to Richmond if they're dispatched. So if there is a need, we can pull our other teams. We have public works teams that specifically will hit the waterways, but we'll divert them as needed. So if there is a need, we will divert. We're adding 4 additional teams, and we've restructured our contract in order to start paying staff more. So we're hoping that will also help with retention.
You said there's a Castro team. There's a Castro team. Just for
there is a Castro encampment specific team.
How many are in that team?
There's 2 people to every team.
So
Yeah.
I have a friend who worked
Lisa
with
had a
homeless
follow-up, I
folks.
think, right? But okay, sorry, Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Well, this
question?
is to answer this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
This friend of mine who worked with the homeless in a significant capacity, I asked her what she thought one of the problems was, and she said that it's not that not enough money is spent, it's not spent the right way. And she said, instead of hiring more people, they should pay the people they have more, and they would be more likely to stay. She said that, when you're paying them, $15 or $20 an hour to do this kind of work, they have no incentive to stay.
Yeah. And we've definitely increased our salaries. I think it's a both and. I think we have increased our salaries, and we need more. We're increasing all of our teams from 14 to 20 or 19 by the, as soon as we can. We're actively hiring. So we're doing that right now. And then we're looking to also increase our hours for people out in the field. And I think sometimes that can be an issue, as well, as if you call 211, say at 1 o'clock in the morning. We're not an emergency response teams, but we will go out as soon as we get those calls. But the more folks we have out, the more we can respond in real time to those calls, and there won't be as much of a delay. I hope that answered your question. It is a process for us, for sure. And like Supervisor Joya and Levana have mentioned, the workforce shortage, it's real. And we're feeling it just as much as our healthcare partners are.
I'd like to remind everybody, we have about 10 more minutes for questions. So I know Lisa has a follow-up question, and then we have a few more. Obviously, this is why we discussed possibly having a special meeting. There's never enough time, but I do want to get through those last 4 questions, and then we'll take a look at having you back. Lisa?
My last one. So John, I think you mentioned the timeline for Care Court is 1 year approximately.
When will Care Court get implemented in Contra Costa, Christy? Or Levon?
2024, we're in the 2024 cohort.
So
That was dictated to us.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, the state didn't provide us any funding to implement it.
So that pretty much.
This is the problem. What's new? And this is why we're negotiating with the governor and the legislature about all of this, because it's like they're saying counties they're good at telling us what to do. They're not as good about paying us to do it.
John, I think there's a unicorn over your shoulder. You might want to look to your right.
Well, but I guess my question to you, John, is, are you guys, so there's no money, right, dedicated to this, but on top of it, I think the last time we spoke, correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't even a place to put them. If we have the money, we don't have dedicated facilities to house them and or the staff. So
let's let Lavana can talk about that, because we are working to implement that in our A3 program to have places for people to go. And yes, in fact, let me just say something that's related. Right now, most of our money we spend on mental health comes from the from the tax on income over $1 million, Prop 63, right? From 20 years ago. That's not all, but it's a lot of the money we get. And I think statewide, it's around $4 billion a year. The governor has proposed going to the ballot to take away about $1 billion of that from counties and instead spend that $1 billion on housing with services. So we are working with the governor because it is taking a lot of money for badly needed mental health services that is already underfunded and shifting it to, yes, a good thing, housing with services, but it's still taking away from the direct services we need also to prevent people from becoming homeless or address them to keep them out of homelessness. So that's part of the discussion we're having with the administration, at least CSAC is having. It's like, and then he's looking at a $3 to $5 billion housing bond, one-time money. We are saying we need sustainable funding. So this is why we are really engaged with the state on this. You will get a chance to vote on this if it gets on the ballot. We're saying we need new money for homeless housing, but to take away money for mental health services is going to make a challenging situation more challenging.
I agree 100%.
So let me just say, Lavana, briefly, the work that's I know we're planning to do to try to increase. So some of the facilities would be more moderate, level of care. Do you want to just briefly mention that, Lavana?
Yeah. So again, we don't want to be in a situation where we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because ultimately that's what we want to avoid. Our behavioral health department right now is working really hard to bring in additional dollars. I won't use the acronyms, but bridge housing dollars that'll support individuals in stepping down from treatment services and getting into housing, as well as adult residential treatment beds and services with the really intensive treatment services available. Christy actually has been working really closely with behavioral health as, again, they're asking for some alignment. So Christy, and we haven't had any updates yet. So I do want to say we are actively pursuing as a health department, and specifically our behavioral health division, and yet we don't yet have outcomes from those applications. So still waiting. Christy, anything to add to that?
Yeah, one was submitted yesterday for bridge housing, and then the other one we're just waiting on to hear back from the application that would literally help us with bringing new beds online. So to your point, Lisa, this is exactly where folks could go, 2 separate applications for that. We're hoping to hear in the next 2 weeks.
And just to
Thank
get an
you,
idea,
Ivana and Christie.
sorry.
Oh, that's okay, John. I
No,
just
no,
want
go
to
ahead.
make sure we have time to get to the next 3 questions as well. And maybe we can address the questions, but not the very specifics, because
Yeah.
I think that's time for a longer meeting. Graham, thanks for your patience.
Thanks, Phil. 3 questions, observations, if I may. On the one hand, here we're saying that part of the problem of homelessness is the lack of housing. But the city of Richmond, along with other people, slap on rent control on top of just cause evictions, and therefore driving away any potential renters to come in here and build and make available rental rental housing. So it's completely at cross purposes, rent control and providing accommodation for the homeless. That's one point. The second point is, I certainly take a question about all the problems. Have you any idea how we can fix this? We've identified all of the various issues. Is there any strategy that can be imposed?
Yeah, I put the link into the program, like the whole document with laying out. It would take me too long to explain it. I put it in the chat. I put a link to the op-ed we wrote, which is brief, but that I put a link to a website that goes into very specific principles and proposals about what we should to do, what we need to do. And I will say, each city has there's a shortage of housing in this state, in this region, in the Bay Area. It's not limited to one city. In fact, unless we deal with this as a region, and one city can solve it, and it's not going to help if the region doesn't solve it, because people move around, right? The demands. There is an effort right now to talk about a regional housing measure that would be significant. That would be passed in all 9 counties to really build a lot more affordable housing. And there's discussions by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and others. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. But as I say, the issue of rent control. As I say, I as a landlord would see that as a major issue. The third question and final one, thank you, is that there's no mention of the federal government getting involved.
Yeah, well,
sorry. This is a national problem,
mhm.
and the feds have got the money and they can do something nationally. Is there any move here amongst you guys to sort of try and escalate this up to sort of to the federal level to get them involved to try and address it nationally?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the focus that we are working on to change the laws in the state of California, because those are much more reachable goals. You're absolutely right. The federal government can easily invest more. In fact, our 54-unit project in San Pablo has the help of $1 million a year from HUD. So yes, no, I mean, my comments aren't at the exclusion of work being done at the federal level. It's just that, we're working on a major proposal here in California, which I think we absolutely need. And then once we have our system straight, of course, we want more money from the federal government. And I recently met with members of Congress back in Washington a few weeks ago. We talked about this. So yes, there is discussion, and the National Association of Counties is working on the federal level.
Thanks, John. Carolina. You're on mute.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, Phil. And thank you all for the important work that you do. I just wanted a quick clarification on when we talk about the number of available beds, the 2,600, are we talking about the total number of beds that exist, and some of which are taken, or are those the beds that are actually available and free? And if they're actually available and free, why are they not taken?
They're taken. So I want to be really clear.
They're all taken. Okay.
Yes, that's our complete inventory. We are full to the gills every single day. One of the reality is we need more inventory. Housing.
Clear. Thank you.
We're on.
Thank you.
There's about
And we'll-
1,600,
and we'll finish up-
1,600 homeless people in the county. Is that about right from our point? Around 1,600? What's that estimate?
Unsheltered, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. And we'll finish up with, Carolina, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. We'll finish up with Michael and then move on to the rest of the meeting. Clearly, I think a longer meeting, a much longer meeting will benefit us in the near future.
As any large problem, there are a multiplicity of answers because there are a multiplicity of challenges, and I certainly congratulate John and and the staff looking at it in a comprehensive regional way. But one of the things that also we don't have much control over are private equity firms keeping units off the off the market. And that seems to me to be a change in state law that's needed.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I saw a study that showed that there were approximately the same amount of vacant units as there were need, just in the wrong place for the wrong price.
Yes, absolutely. As you say, you're wise in saying this. Problems like this have multiple causes, each contributing and layering on each other, Michael. And, practices like that keep units off the market, contribute to the pressure on housing. I think it was the city of Vancouver, is it, that put a tax on vacant units that investors purchased and held on to and never owners, or they didn't rent them. So they've put taxes on those. There's been some discussion on that, but yes, there's clearly vacant units that contribute to this as well.
Henry Lloyd George figured this out a long time ago.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. That was an unexpected twist. I want to thank John and his colleagues for coming. And we hope to hear and see from you as we are able to maybe make a longer meeting. Definitely useful to have Lavana and Christy, I'm sorry, with us. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's been a long day and a really long week for you. We're grateful for you to be here in our tiny little neighborhood, and thank you for making yourselves available directly to the residents of Point Richmond. And we hope to see you soon.
Right, and we know that you are not, you are not exempt from the unhoused situation, and and so continue to reach out to my office, to CORE, on specific issues. And I know Councilmember Zepeda's on, and is interested, and also reaches out. I think Cesar was on the board of GRIP, Greater Richmond Interfaith Program, right? And so they're an important partner as well.
Thank you very much. We're grateful for your time. And now we can move on to the little neighborhood items. Thank you for being here. If for those of you who are doing community briefs, we are running late tonight on an already long meeting. So if it's okay for you to just say everything's fine, and if you have short briefs, that would be nice. We do have some remembrances at the end. So let's go on, please, to anybody from Maskers. Anything to share? Nope. Check that one off. Richmond Neighborhood Coordinating Council.
I
That
do.
would be Cordell or Lisa?
I do. So I'll do. So I'm gonna keep this short. So for this month's meeting, we had about 50 people on the Zoom call for the budget discussion. So that was pretty interesting. So and then we discussed whether or not to go back to in-person or hybrid. So that's debatable. So our next meeting is going to be May the 8th at 7 p.m. So and then oh yeah. So according to Stephanie Nye, she says that the neighborhood council can use the community center. So as Texas, it's not feasible. So that's.
Thank you, Cordell. I don't see Gary here for Richmond Tennis and Benevolent. Anybody, Graham, do you want to speak?
Wait, we do
Hold on.
have Gary.
Well, here, I'm Gary. Today, I saw him today at the gym and he told me, and Peter stole my thunder earlier, he's home watching the Warriors and everything's fine.
Of course he is.
Okay, okay, I can take my headband off now. Okay.
That was it?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you for being brief, Gary. I really appreciate it, and I like the shorter hair. Graham, do you want to speak on the victory?
Yeah, very briefly, we are still open for visitors Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock until 4 o'clock. And we have our famous pancake breakfast starting. First one being on Mother's Day, May the 14th. Please come. $15 a head. And a lot of us could mentally qualify as children of being under 8. That's only $5. The next one is on June the 18th, which is Father's Day. We will be doing something on Independence Day weekend. And the next ones are on August the 20th, September the 17th, and finally Fleet Week in October. So we do have a pancake breakfast basically every month. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Anybody from Women's West Side?
Yes.
Oh, hi,
I'm
Doreen.
Doreen. I'm the treasurer of Women's West Side. Diane is out tonight. So just that we were very happy with the art stroll and spring fling. And we did do a lot of work for it. We had a rummage sale at the same thing and made a good amount of money. And we're giving some to Prnc, some to the Bay Area Rescue Mission, and some to the Richmond Emergency Food Pantry. We're our next meeting is on May 7th, and we're going to have Sergeant Eric Oliver of the Richmond Police Department to talk about email fraud. And we've had a couple of new members. I think we have about 35 members now. So the club is pretty big, and we have a lot of fun at our meetings.
Yeah, it's nice to see some new faces and some new fingers in the dirt. Thank you, Doreen. Peter.
Not much to report. We're still doing table tennis. If you guys want to come by, it's at the Point San Pablo Yacht Club on Cutting. That's it.
All righty. Jim, new on the Rosie the Riveter. I attended a lecture that he did that was absolutely fantastic. Jim, what do you have going on at Rosie? Jim, you with us? You're muted. I think you're muted.
He's not muted, but we can't hear him. So I'm not sure if the volume on your settings needs to be tweaked in your Zoom preferences.
Or you didn't maybe press a use computer audio. Can we skip Jim and go back to him? Is that cool? And we'll go on to anybody from PR CERT today. Charmaine usually does that. She's out of town. PRBA, Karen.
I have unmuted. Okay, PRBA, we had a meeting on April 13th. We're in the preliminary pre-planning for the Fall Fest in October, and we are having a mixer on May 25th at Little Louie's. And that's about all I got.
All right. Short and sweet. Thank you. Jim, I see you're back with us. Do you want to try to unmute? No. You got a mic problem, Jim. All right, we'll try one. We'll keep pushing it back to the end, and then we'll make something up. Anybody? Bonnie Joe, are you here? I don't see Bonnie. Anyone want to speak for the History Association? Karen again? Do you know anything going on?
Just that my next stint as docent is going to be May 6th, Saturday, May 6th. Yep.
And what will you be wearing?
Oh, good question. I haven't made that decision yet. It'll be something fabulous, I assure you.
We're breathless. All righty, Arts at Point Richmond. Anybody from Arts at Point Richmond? All right, I'll just give them another plug. They did a fantastic job on the art stroll. I think it was better than ever. And I also will encourage you to look at the Taking It Outdoors program, because with the art stroll at the beginning of April, they changed all of those banners all over town. So we've got new art in public places, and I think it is a unanimous success. Kate, are you still with us? From Magic Lantern, she was here before, but I know this meeting's running later than usual. I don't see Kate. I don't see anybody from Prnc here today. So the community briefs are catching us up today. Lisa, any big drama with the homeowners associations?
Let's see, the appeal for the PG&E residential development is going to be, currently it's scheduled to be heard May 16th before the city council meeting. So I would encourage everybody who has concerns about that project to please write your council and or attend in person on May 16th to the city council meeting. And we're in the process, Richmond Fire Department is in the process of scheduling their second ever citywide evacuation drill. They did the first one at Hilltop last year. We are trying to schedule one for Brickyard Cove. We're looking at Saturday, July 15th, very early stages. So just kind of keep that in mind. It could either be in June or July, but the June date was just not going to work because it was like graduation weekend and all sorts of stuff. So if you live in Brickyard Cove and you want to participate in that, you'll be getting some outreach here shortly in the next month or so. And so kind of pencil out July 15th on your calendar.
And that might be useful for those surrounding Brickyard Cove as well, because I guess we're talking about the tunnel and canal and trains.
It's really early stages. Everybody will be notified, but the main objective is to get the people from Brickyard Cove out, and figuring out that route and where they would actually stage is still in its planning stages, shall we say.
Think about Castro Street too, because that is an exit.
Right.
The trains are a very big issue, so.
That's why I have no hair, the trains. Jim, we're going to try you one more time to unmute, and if not, we'll have to hear from you twice as long next time. It's not working, my friend. I'm so sorry, but we love Rosie. Graham, what I'd like to do is jump to you. Graham was going to speak during the public comments, but it's only a couple minutes. We're actually a few minutes early. Would you like to take maybe 3 or 4 minutes? Did you want to update us on something about the Keller Beach?
Yes, Phil, thank you very much indeed. And I'm glad to see Caesar's here too. Hi, Caesar. Caesar hosted a meeting whereby the city council and the consultants working on the Keller Beach sanitary system came down and made a presentation. Unfortunately, because of medical issues, I couldn't attend, but I understand between Zoomer-inners and physical attendees, there were about 100 people there at the meeting. And a whole series of issues was raised about the way the city and the consulting firm had gone about this particular program. And that, my understanding being is basically people were very, very hostile. But they are now committed to come back to us through a further series of meetings to explain to us exactly what is now happening and whether there's likely to be any further reconsideration of this. However, we have a small working group and we're working with Caesar and to try and link up with the LUDRC as has been suggested. And we're trying to get a meeting with Rod Sartre sometime this week to sort of get together, see how we can cooperate and coordinate, and then with Caesar leading the charge, turn around and keep applying pressure on the city to make sure that they do come up with a proper feasibility study rather than that half-baked effort which they attempted to sort of fob us on us a couple of weeks ago. So the plan is that along with Carolina and Richard, we'll be hopefully in a meeting with Rod early next week. And then Caesar will be getting back to you to see how we can coordinate between all three bodies to move our interest in what is happening on the Color Beach sewage system forward.
Thank you, Graham.
So that's where we stand.
Thanks. And I do want to clarify for those of you who are new, the LUDRC is the land use subcommittee of the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council. And since we have great interest in this, and there's the homeowner, I'm just going to call it the homeowners who live in that area, we are, the PRNC is handing this over to the LUDRC, the Land Use Design Review Committee, who will, as Graham mentioned, work together with Caesar and the homeowners. And then in the future, the LUDRC will inform the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council when it's time to have meetings and presentations. And I'm pretty much predicting that some of those meetings are going to be special meetings because they're going to be complicated and not in the usual 10 or 15 minutes that they present. So we stand ready to take our directive from our subcommittee, who's working closely with Graham, Caesar, and Caroline and company. So I just wanted to clarify that because I do see some new faces in the group and you don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, and also just finally, I think regarding this, several of us are quite prepared to join the LUDRC, sort of broaden the aspect a bit and to be able to bring a bit more community involvement in at an earlier stage.
Thank you, Graham. As a matter of fact, although it's a little premature, we are actually at the end of the summer, we will be recruiting new members to the LUDRC. So there's a lot of skills sitting in front of us. Some of you have served on it already, or even higher in city government. So that's nice to know because that's coming down the pike and that we are looking for new blood. And some of you might want to just maybe try to find time to sit on our board as well at the PRNC level. Cordell, I think, will be our first speaker for public forum.
Yes, Phil, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I came up with an idea to put on, this is something for a future agenda. So as I mentioned during the RNCC report, when we had about 50 people for the budget, I was like, I was thinking that in my mind, I was thinking that if we could invite them to come back, to provide a brief update on where we are with the budget. So that was one idea. And then the second idea was actually it's an invitation to everyone. So everyone is invited to the Richmond Rotary Club weekly meeting in early June. So it's at 12:30 at the Richmond Country Club, and it's only $25. $5 if it's a donation. So our speaker for that meeting, we will have Superintendent Hurst, which is who I mentioned from time to time, to see if we can invite him to come to one of our meetings to tell us what's going on with the district. So everyone's invited. So, and they have a wonderful lunch too there. So please come. $25, that's not a bad deal.
Thank you, Cordell, food critic and meeting inviter. Sally, you're going to talk to us about Point Malate, I guess?
Actually, I'm going to announce that the Point Richmond Gallery is going to be hosting a photography show featuring photographs from 3 different wonderful photographers who have taken pictures out at Point Malate. And the grand opening is going to be June 24th. The photos are of landscapes and animals and plants, and there will also be photos of our mascot, Molly, the river otter. And the Great Tortilla Conspiracy is going to be serving tostadas on tortillas that have Molly's image on them. So it should be, and there will be aguas frescas from Masa. So it should be.
Who could ask for anything more?
Exactly.
Adorable tortillas.
Exactly. And other mischievous events have been suggested, but aren't far enough along for us to know whether we can actually pull them off or not. And then for those of you who've been to the speaker series, Speaking Up for Point Malate, Monday's session, these are on Mondays from 6 to 7. Monday's presentation is going to be the Autism Nature Trail at Letchwood State Park, which is in New York. And that is a trail that's specifically tailored to visitors on the autism spectrum. But it's really for everybody. And they got thousands of visitors their first month. So they'll be talking and speaking up at Point Malate on Monday. Thanks.
Thanks, Sally. I will brush off my otter costume and make sure it's
Excellent.
freshly pressed.
Yes, there may be a contest.
Okay. Peter, did you have something to mention?
Yes, for those who missed the Black Pirate Barbecue, we have a new restaurant out here at Point San Pablo Marina, where Sue and I live. It's the Sailing Goat. They had a soft opening last weekend, but this weekend coming up, the 28th, 29th, and 30th will be their official opening. And from 11:30 to 8:30. And these are the folks that used to be, what was the?
Annabee's Table.
Annabee's Table.
Annabee's?
So,
Okay.
yeah, so the food is very good. So if you wanna, if it's a nice day and you wanna get out, I'm sure you could come out here and stand in line and sit down on a picnic table and have a nice meal. That's it.
Thanks, Peter. If you haven't eaten from Annabeef, there's nothing like it. This guy's a world-class chef, so that's exciting. I don't see any more hands. I just want to welcome Jake, who's a new neighbor, and has already done some volunteer work for Women's West Side and really did a lot of volunteer work at the Spring Fling. So if you're still listening in, Jake, welcome to our meeting. And now we'll go to remembrance and celebration. I think that Norma wanted to mention something. And I'm sorry, and Vivian also. Norma?
Yes, thanks, Phil. I think a lot of you know Linda Newton, who has not unfortunately been able to be active with the council in the most recent years. Her husband, Chris Newton, passed away last week. So wanted to offer his name up to the group.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Norma. Thanks, Norma. Linda has been a volunteer in almost every organization for decades. And I did call on her the other day. She is calm. She seems calm. And but our thoughts will stay with her. And I don't know if it's Vivian or Jeff who wanted to mention something.
It's me. Hotel Mac is coming back.
Oh, yeah. We had them last month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I hope to have Annabeef this month or next month, at least to introduce themselves. So yeah, that's exciting news. It's going to be Italian. And I just want to say this is slightly odd when it comes to remembering people. I would like to remember the humanity of the homeless gentleman who died on our doorstep a couple of weeks ago. He was a troubled soul, drug addicted, and very deeply mentally ill. He was somebody who was known to the city from other neighborhoods, and the social services couldn't come through on time for him. I do believe that he was short for this world, that there was no amount of care short of having some type of world-class treatment for him in a hospital for long-term that would have saved him from a young death. But as we're often, when we're concerned about homeless, I think that we're often accused of being uncaring. This was somebody's kid, and literally somebody's brother from Richmond. So I just wanted to kind of remember him and hope that these mental health and homeless organizations can get together to make sure that it doesn't happen again. That's kind of a heavy note. I think we're hoping to have Chevron next month, but we'll see how that unfolds. I'd like to thank you all for sticking it out with us and for asking such good questions. And it does look like more discussion about the homeless will be coming down the pike with more organizations involved. Neighbors, thank you for joining. Let us know if there's anything we can do for you. Pay your dues at pointrichmond.org membership and volunteer. We do need some help, and I think that we're going to need some at-large help as well. So maybe you won't need to serve on the board, but you might be able to help with some consistent volunteer skills. Thank you all so much for joining tonight, and we'll see you next month.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Did a great job, Phil.
Thanks. That's a tough meeting. And I'll see you in a few days at my living room, a living room near me.
What's your address, by the way, while I've got you?
You don't know.
I'm gonna.
I know where he lives. I don't know the address. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're all friends here. 25 Nickel, Nicholl.
Okay.
Between Tunnel and Washington.
All right. That's it.
All righty. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, Caesar. Thanks for being here.